Hey there, deep divers. Are you ready to really dig into a spicy take on Apple and their big AI gamble?
Oh, I'm always ready for a good Apple deep dive, especially when it comes to AI. It's everywhere these days.
Yeah, you're telling me, right. And this newsletter we're diving into doesn't disappoint. It's called Synthetic Work, and this issue goes deep on dissecting Apple's latest AI announcements. You know all those new Apple Intelligence features they've got everyone buzzing about?
Oh, yeah, the hype machine is in overdrive for sure, but like always, context is king.
Couldn't agree more. And Alessandro, the author of this newsletter, he brings a ton of context to the table. He's been a Mac user for over 20 years, owns like a dozen Apple products.
Wow, okay, so this isn't just some random tech hater.
No, no, not at all. In fact, he loves Apple. But even he was starting to lose faith, particularly with Siri, which, well, we'll get to that. But first, he lays out these three core reasons he loves Apple, and I bet at least one will resonate with you. First off, the design, the sleekness, but also the intentionality of it, that less is more philosophy.
Yeah, you can definitely see that in their products.
Totally. Then there's the quality. Alessandro says you can just feel the quality in Apple products.
I think a lot of people would agree with that. There's something about holding a well-crafted device.
Exactly. And finally, he loves how Apple smooths out the user experience, makes tech less clunky, less frustrating. He actually spent a decade at Red Hat advocating for exactly that.
Wow, a decade at Red Hat. So he knows a thing or two about user experience and what it takes to get it right.
Oh yeah, he's got the credentials for sure.
Yeah.
But so with all that love for Apple, how does this guy view their AI endeavors?
Yeah, that's the million-dollar question, isn't it?
Well, let's just say he doesn't hold back. He starts with dropping this truth bomb. Siri, despite handling something like 1.5 billion requests per day.
1.5 billion.
Seriously.
Yep, 1.5 billion. He says most of those are probably just people using it as a glorified alarm clock.
Okay, that's a little savage, but honestly, based on my experience with Siri, I wouldn't be surprised.
Right. And it gets even wilder. Remember how Apple hired Google's AI lead back in 2018? Seemed like they were going all in on AI.
Oh yeah, I remember that. Big move at the time. Everyone thought Siri was about to become this powerhouse.
Exactly. But get this, Siri actually got worse under his watch.
Wait, seriously? Yeah. Not just a little hiccup, but straight up worse. I mean, we've all been there,
Yeah.
right? Yelling at our phones in frustration because Siri just doesn't get it.
Oh, absolutely. It's like a rite of passage for anyone with a smartphone these days. You think with all their resources and brain power, they would have figured it out by now. So what happened?
Well, that's what makes this so fascinating. It shows that Siri's struggles, it wasn't just bad luck. It reflects choices they made along the way.
Choices, huh? Interesting. So what kind of choices are we talking about here?
Oh, this brings us to another piece of the puzzle, shortcuts. Now, you might be familiar with this tool, but a lot of Apple users aren't. It lets you automate tasks like, I don't know, sending a text when you get home or something. Huge potential.
Yeah, I've dabbled in shortcuts a bit. Powerful stuff. You can wrap your head around it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But here's the catch. Apple barely touched it for years.
Ah, so they had this powerful automation tool just sitting there.
Pretty much. And now, suddenly, Apple's all about AI and shortcuts working together. But Alessandro is skeptical. Can they really pivot that quickly after years of neglect? Raises serious questions about their overall AI strategy.
It makes you wonder, are they just trying to slap a new coat of paint on an old engine? Or is there a deeper shift happening within Apple? Because building a foundation for automation from the ground up is very different from tacking it on as an afterthought, especially in the AI world.
He makes a really good point there. It's like building for automation from day one versus kind of shoehorning it in later. Totally different ballgame.
Huge difference. And it makes you wonder about their true commitment to really owning AI in the long run. Speaking of which, it seems like Apple's approaching AI from these two distinct angles right now. They've got their own AI features, although so far they're kind of sprinkled in here and there. And then on the other hand, they're almost acting like a middleman for these other big AI players like, OpenAI and such.
Yeah, like they want to have their AI cake and eat it too.
Exactly. And both of those approaches deserve a closer look.
Okay, so let's start with the whole Apple-developed AI side of things.
Yeah.
Alessandro really breaks down the features they showed off at WWDC, and honestly, kind of underwhelming. We're talking like AI-generated emojis, some basic text editing help, nothing that screams the future is here, especially not from Apple with all their resources.
It makes you wonder, is this intentional? Like, are they deliberately keeping it low-key for now, or are they scrambling to catch up, and this is just, like, the best they could do?
Well, Alessandro seems to think it's the latter. Like they're playing catch-up, not exactly leading the pack. He even compares these new features to putting lipstick on a pig.
Ouch. Okay, that's a little harsh. But I get his point. Apple has this reputation, right? They're supposed to be ahead of the curve, not trailing behind.
Exactly. And when you compare what they're doing to, say, Google or OpenAI, I mean, it's hard to argue that they're not lagging behind a bit.
Yeah, it's definitely not the Apple we're used to seeing. So we've got Siri struggling to keep up and these new AI features that, let's face it, aren't exactly blowing anyone's mind. So where does that leave Apple?
Well, that brings us to their role as the AI gatekeeper, which honestly is both fascinating and a little concerning at the same time.
Oh, the gatekeepers. That's where things get really interesting because Apple's legendary control over its ecosystem, that could be a double-edged sword here.
Oh, Alessandro does not hold back on the double-edged sword part. He points out how, at least in its current form, their implementation is kind of clunky. Essentially, they're partnering with OpenAI, right? Letting you access ChatGPT directly through Apple devices without needing a separate OpenAI account, which, on the surface, sounds kind of convenient.
Yeah, sounds great in theory. What's the catch?
The catch is every time you want to actually use any of those OpenAI features, you need explicit permission. Every single time.
Really? So it's like they're putting a roadblock right there in the middle of the user experience. And remember how much Apple supposedly values a smooth, seamless experience.
It's like they're hindering the very technology they're trying to embrace.
Exactly. And what's even more baffling, there are already third-party apps that do this better. Alessandro specifically calls out the ChatGPT app on iOS. It allows for background listening. You can interact with it more naturally. No constant permissions popping up. It's just smoother, more intuitive.
Which makes Apple's implementation seem even more clunky and out of touch, right? So the big question becomes, can Apple really be the AI platform if their approach is basically let other people build the cool AI stuff and we'll just control access to it?
It's a really risky play. If Apple can nail this integration, if they can somehow create an experience that's truly seamless, truly powerful, all within their ecosystem, yeah, that could be massive. But
But if they mess it up, if they overcomplicate things, if they restrict things too much,
they could end up stifling the entire AI assistant category. And not just for Apple users, we could be talking about ripple effects across the entire tech industry. It's a lot of power, and it remains to be seen whether they can handle it without, screwing it up for everyone.
so to bring it back to Alessandro's analysis, is this Apple's master plan for AI domination? Are they going to be okay just being this awkward middleman while companies like OpenAI call the shots?
Well, based on what we're seeing so far, it's not looking great. Alessandro actually uses a pretty strong word. He thinks Apple is more focused on survival than strategy right now.
Survival? Huh. That's a pretty strong word. What does he mean by that? He's talking about this idea of Apple basically becoming the dumb pipe of the AI era.
Ooh, that's got to be a scary thought for a company like Apple, right? They've built their whole empire on controlling the user experience.
That's exactly his point. Think about it. Like right now, our phones are our lifelines, right?
Hmm.
Everything goes through them. But what happens if these AI assistants get so good, so smart, that the actual physical device, the phone, becomes less important?
You're just talking to the AI, whatever form it takes, and the phone is almost irrelevant.
Right. Like just a dumb pipe, just a way for the data to flow through. And Alessandro uses a really good example to illustrate this whole thing. Search.
Oh, interesting. How does search play into this?
Well, think about it. Apple, they don't have their own search engine, right? They rely on Google.
True, very true. And that little deal costs them billions every year, doesn't it?
Billions with a B.
Oh.
Just shows you the power dynamics at play. So if they're already in that position with something as fundamental as search, what happens when AI becomes even more central to our digital lives?
And that's the multi-billion-dollar question, isn't it? Where does that leave Apple?
And that's what Alessandro is saying. This current approach, the little bits of AI here and there, being the middleman for other companies' AI, it might not be enough in a world where AI is the interface.
It's like they're trying to hold on to this old map while the whole world is being redrawn around them.
That's a great way to put it. It's like, can you even call it Apple intelligence if they're not the ones really driving the intelligence?
Right. It raises some fundamental questions about their whole approach. And honestly, this is bigger than just Apple.
That's what I was just thinking. So why should, like, the average person listening to this care about this whole AI turf war? What's the takeaway here?
Because it's about the future of how we interact with technology, period. Like,
Yeah.
who do you want controlling that experience? A company like Apple with their walled gardens and their, let's be honest, sometimes kind of controlling
Or
ways.
some other big tech giant, right?
Exactly. Or will it be the AI itself calling the shots in ways we can't even imagine yet?
It's kind of a mind-blowing thought, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
The possibilities, but also the potential pitfalls.
Absolutely. And that's where I think Alessandro leaves us with this really thought-provoking question. If Apple, with all its money and brain power, is having this much trouble adapting to the AI world, what does that tell us about what else is happening out there that we haven't even seen yet?
Ooh, that's a good one. Like, are there breakthroughs just brewing in some lab right now that are going to completely change the game as we know it?
Makes you think, doesn't it?
It really does. And on that note, that wraps up our deep dive into the world of Apple and their big AI gamble. We hope you enjoyed the ride.
Yeah, and hopefully learned a thing or two along the way. Until next time, deep divers.